So this unit is about the Gestalt unit, and this was a movement that was after World War One, and people were kind of going away from the old forms and philosophies in the fields of design and architecture, as well as art, fine art, and writing. And so some of the more abstract ideas were starting to come into play. A lot of people were incorporating things that look more machine-like in their aesthetics into the artwork during this industrial age. So this was a trend in the 20th century, and it became sort of parallel um, with art and design. So in other words, we're starting to see the design and art come together again. They're no longer separated as they had been in certain stages. So of course the word Gestalt is the Dutch word for the style. And this was sort of, you can see the roots in this movement from Dadaism. We have more of this flipping artwork on its head kind of feeling, and things were kind of reduced to the more geometric forms, as you can see the progression of images that are coming up. And as you will see, one of the primary leaders of this art style was Theo van Doesburg, who was an architect. So this is a study by Van Doesburg. We start off with a cow, and it looks like a quick gesture sketch, the basis of the image that he would come to create a utopian ideal as he further and further simplified it. So you can still see the cow in this image, however, it's beginning to be reduced to mere geometric shades separated only by color and line. You can still see that it's an animal of some sort, but this looks very cubist, so you can see the influence of cubism, only the Gestalt artist took it a step further. As you can see in this image, there's a very asymmetrical breakdown of only rectangles and squares, often with a lot of negative space, although I'm sure that in this instance the negative space was just as intentional and integral to the design as a whole as the blocks of color. So one of their main goals that came from one of the Dada notions actually was to kind of stand against the pretentious design aesthetics of the elite people during the pre-war. So these were sort of trying to break away and create their own style, nothing based on the older styles. This was supposed to look very modern and very revolutionary. You can also see sort of a Japanese design influence. We have a lot of sense of balance, and the color palette also looks very Japanese, as you recall in some of the images from previous units, where we have the primary colors a little bit muted, kind of the forest green and the black and the white. Seeing a very severe insistence on rectilinear planes. So there is no room for any curves here, no curvilinear lines. This is very much the opposite of that style. And there is also no decorative features. This is also extremely different from the Victorian styles, where they would embellish things just to in order to take up space. We're seeing a lot of breathing room. These panels almost give the illusion that they could slide against each other. For the Gestalt magazine in 1917 by Vilmos Huszar is a collaboration with Theo van Doesburg. So we see Huszar's logo, or rather design, in the middle, forming a perfect rectangle shape, and then we have the font below, kind of also creating a block of text, as well as the logo at the top, which also looks like its own rectangular shape. Something else to note about the font here is that each of these letters is its own little unit, while still also making up a rectangle on its own. And you can almost kind of say it about the woodblock print in the center too. Then everything, all the shapes in here are made up of different size rectangles, so it's almost got like a fractal look to it, I would say. This image is made up of one type of shape. There's still a lot of dramatic quality into it with the different thickness in the lines and its attention to into the void space as well as the design element itself. Everything was taken into consideration, and there's contrast between the different style elements. Employs a very logical style. There's no decorative excess present in the Art Nouveau style. There's an emphasis on both construction and function, and it very much was meant to be a symbol of something that could be used in modern life. And even though I showed the example of the cow earlier on, this image was, I believe, meant to just be abstract in and of itself. I don't believe it's supposed to be representational of anything in particular. So this is a new cover of the De Stael magazine from 1921. So this new logo had a very standard sans serif type, and it was designed by Van Doesburg as well as Mondrian. And the NB in red stands for Nouvelle Building, which means new imaging. And what's notable about this is that even though it's a very two-dimensional piece, and again we have the asymmetry, even though at first glance it looks like there is asymmetry, but we have this three-dimensional element right here when we have the layering of the two texts over one another. Van Doesburg was sort of the ambassador of the movement. He traveled throughout Europe to promote the De Stael movement, and he also had some similarities with the Dada style, and he eventually worked with the German Bauhaus, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. About his influence with the Dada style. This is Meccano, which is a journal for the movement, and we see this sort of things kind of spun on their heads, misaligned. We see diagonal here. We see the letters turned in every different which way. And when I hinted at a little bit before about the machine aesthetic, Meccano means mechanic in French, and this is sort of an indication of how the artist worked and how this had a similarity with Dadaism. And in this image was sort of meant to be sort of a game with the reader. You're supposed to turn the cover different directions, oriented differently in order to make sense of the words, since the letters were all spun around differently. And also, of course, this blade here is another representation of the machine. Yet the artist is not going for as much of an extreme pre-war sensation. He's kind of going with more of a cynicism, more of a commentary on the war. So that is a little bit about the work of the pioneer in the De Stael movement.